In this video, we're going to look at the let keyword, which was introduced as part of JavaScript from ES6 or ES2015 onwards. And in particular, we're going to look at why you should always use the let keyword over the var keyword. So first thing we're going to do is jump to my screen and we'll have a look at the let keyword in action. So if I go let a equals hello world, let a equals hello world. And then if I do a console.log of a, you can see it returns hello world, and that works fine. If I try and access that variable before I've declared it, so if I try and do a console.log a here, I'm going to get a cannot access a before initialization. So it's going to throw me an error. Yeah. Now that is different for anyone who's got experience of ES5 and below. That is different from how the var keyword works. So if I change this let to a var, you can see it comes back with an undefined. And the reason it does that is there's a thing called hoisting going on. So what actually is happening underneath the hood, JavaScript is taking a first pass at this file, and where it sees var a equals hello world, what it's actually doing is taking this var a, moving it above, so it hoists the declaration to the top of the file, and then essentially rewrites the assignment to a equals hello world. So that's the reason that actually works within a var statement. So using the keyword var, I can access my variables before they're actually being declared, whereas I can't with the let keyword. In order to access that variable, it is only a variable from the point of declaration. And of course, with vars, that means I can do utterly weird and wonderful things if I wanted. So I could do things like, I could write things like a equals hello world. I could write var a, and then I could write console.log a, and it's going to return hello world. Absolutely bonkers that I'm assigning hello world to my variable before I've even declared my variable, but because JavaScript would hoist the var to the top, then actually how it reads it would be like this. So again, that's sort of crazy syntax. That can't happen with the let statement. So if I did a let a here, I'm going to get a cannot access a before initialization because I can only access my variables from the point of declaration. Otherwise, it's going to throw an error. So the next thing about the let keyword to be aware of is its block scope. So let me show you what I mean by that. So let me create another global variable. So we'll say a again, and we'll say a equals hello world. And we'll just console log that. Console.log a, and it's returning hello world. If I was to then create a brand new block, so the brackets that you see here represent a block, and I was to write something like let a equals hello world 2, and we'll console.log that again, you'll see it's returning hello world 2. So the scope of this a is within this block here. And then obviously if I was to then do another console.log a here, it's going to continue to return hello world. So my assignment of hello world 2 is scoped only to this block here, and it's not affecting above and it's not affecting below. So of course, this is super useful for when you're doing things like conditional statements, like if statements. So if I have something like if true. So let's compare this now to how this would operate if I was running a var statement rather than a let. So let's see what happens when I change this let to a var. So let's go through what the code's actually doing here. So before, as you see before, it says it's returning hello world 2. And then as you would expect, it's going to return hello world 2 here as well. But what you can see is the assignment of hello world 2 to a here has actually affected outside of the block. Yeah, so I'm outside of this block now, but my overall a, which I declared up here, is actually returning hello world 2. Whereas before, when that was a let, then it was just hello world. Let me explain why that is. So if I come back to this being a var, and it's all to do with the fact that the var statement is function scoped and because of hoisting. So the first thing that you're going to see here is because it's function scoped, not block scoped, there is no function here, so it's going to scope to global, as we see. So this var is going to also, so this var is also going to get hoisted. So let's do that. So that moves to over here. We have a var a that moves to the top. And we can take away this a here. So what actually happens is a is assigned to hello world. A is then is logged out. A is then assigned to hello world 2 because there's no block scoping. Then when we leave this block, then A is still hello world 2 and it outputs that. Whereas just by making this let A, it returns back to the functionality that we would expect. Okay, now what we're going to do is just convert that little code fragment into a function and then you see how it behaves there. So what I will do is just write function and we'll call it hello. I'm going to stick with the function declaration syntax as opposed to the ES6 function expression syntax just for simplicity. Now I've converted that to hello. Let's just call that for a second. So we'll type in hello and you'll see that console log is returning hello world 2 because that's obviously scoped to the function. If I was to turn this into a var rather than a let, then it continues to return hello world 2 there, and this returns hello world. So there's nothing getting in the way of each other. Obviously, if I then took away the var, then what you would see is a equal hello world 2. So it's messing with the let statement up above. And it's logging at console hello world 2 here, and then obviously it's affected my global variable, and it's returned that is hello world 2 there. So as you see, let and var both work in the exact same way in the case of functions because of the scope. But again, if I was to then introduce a code block here and then if I type in var a equals, and we'll say banana. I can't spell banana, but that's fine. And then if I console log out a here, then you'll see it's going to return banana, but it's also it's not kept the scope within my block. So it's console logging banana here, but because it's function scoped, then it doesn't escape outside of the function, and therefore that continues to say hello world at the bottom. Now, of course, if I turn that var into a let, then you can see it's going to say banana here, but that's going to continue to be hello world there. And then I can get even sort of more meta there, and I can remove the a there so that hello world is changing my global variable. That'll be hello world 2, but banana is not going to affect any of that. But again, if I then change that to a var, it's never escaping this function. The last thing to note about block scoping is I cannot access that variable outside of the block. So let me show you what I mean by that. So if I create a block here, I'm just going to set my hello, and I'm going to set it to world, and we'll do a console.log, and you'll see it's going to return hello, and life is good. But outside of the block, if I try and access hello, then it's just not going to come back with anything because it doesn't have access to it. Now, if I just come into the Node.js environment there for a second, paste that in, and then we'll just do a node play.js, and you'll see it throws an error. And the error is hello is not defined. And that is because I've defined hello within the scope of my block, but I'm trying to access it outside of that block. As you can see from this example, there is really no reason to use the var statement in the modern world, right? So whenever you're declaring your variables, just use the let statement or const, and we'll talk about that in another video. but always use the let statement. The block scope gives you the smallest possible scope for your variables, which means you're less likely to run into any issues. It's probably how you expect your code to work in the first place, and you're not going to suffer from weird hoisting and thinking about how JavaScript is interpreted in the var and where it's going to stay, right? Just use the let keyword. It gives you major advantages.